Hello everyone, I'm Gaurav and welcome to today's tutorial on the basics of AutoLayout in XCode 11. Today, I'll be going over the following topics. I will be talking about what is AutoLayout, why do we need to use AutoLayout, and then I'll give a brief demo using a calculator app that how AutoLayout can help us save development time and maintenance time. For this video, I assume that the user has basic knowledge of iOS development through Xcode and Swift, and that user has a basic layout and coding of the app already prepared before they watch this tutorial. So let's talk about what is an auto layout. It is a constraint-based layout system that was developed by Apple in 2011. It creates an adaptive interface that responds to changes in screen size. That is, if you have screen size of iPhone and a screen size of iPad, then you only need to create constraints for one device and those will carry over to another device irrespective of its size. You don't have to create a view for every screen, but you do have to set a set of constraints that will help the layout to respond to changes in the screen size. Now, why do we need to use AutoLayout? Because it is dynamic, it is easy to build, and it is easy to maintain. We will show all of these features through the following demo tutorial that I will show. Now let's move on to our demo of a basic calculator app. So here we have our Xcode 11, and I have opened a basic calculator app on an iPhone 8 Plus. So I have all of the base top level objects ready for me, and they are arranged in a particular order such that they fill up the entire space just like we want them to. So let's run this app on iPhone 8 Plus. Let's see what happens. So our app is up and running and it's working. But if I change the orientation of the phone, then it's out of order. But if I put it back, it's in order. So our constraints are only set for a particular orientation for this particular iPhone. Similarly, if we run our app on an iPad Pro, then we can see that our objects did not cover the entirety of the app. This is not an ideal case for us, and so we need to make sure that our application runs on all of the screen sizes. For that, we will use AutoLayout. For using AutoLayout in an app like this, which has objects that are of similar size, we can use a property called the stack view right here. So stack view allows us to stack elements that are similar to one another in a single entity such that we can use it so as to provide common constraints for that object. For example, I have these 4 buttons at the top that are similar to one another and I want them to be expand and contract together. So let's shift click on all of these 4 buttons and go to our option here and then select stack view. You will see that these objects have clubbed together and have shrunk. Now let's go to the properties for this stack view. We have the alignment property, we have the distribution property, and we have the spacing property. Since this stack view is horizontal, so the alignment for this stack view is specified as horizontal. Now we want our objects to fill its entire stack view, and we want them to fill equally with one another. And then we will do the same for other objects. So these 4 objects are of the same kind and we want them to expand and contract at the same time, so we embed them in a stack view. Similarly, we change their alignment to fill and distribution to fill equally. Repeat the process for the next 2 rows. Now in the last row we have 3 objects, and the 0 is twice the size of other buttons. So what we will do here is combine these 2 elements into a stack view and fill equally, and then combine this stack view with this single object into a single stack view. So if I fill and I fill equally, then you can see that the 0 has again regained its position as double to that of the buttons. Now once I have completed the stack of individual rows, I want the entire set of buttons to stack together. So to do that, I'll select all of the stacks and embed them together into another stack view. And see here, the axis for the stack view is vertical because it's consisting of a number of stacks, one on top of the other. The alignment for this should be fill, and distribution should be fill equally because we want all of the row stacks to fill for the same properties. Now the spacing for this individual row stacks should be the same as before, so we will change the spacing to 2. As you can see, this has begun to look like what an original calculator should look like. So now our calculator app does not only contain the collection of buttons, it also has a label that consists of the information that the user inputs and the calculations that are performed by the calculator. So to do that, we will combine this single label and this entire stack view into a single stack view. This stack view is a vertical stack view with the alignment of fill and distribution of also fill. So now we want our label to have a spacing of 20 with our buttons of stack view. Now that we have our UI stacked together, let's arrange it in the super view. Select the entire stack view and drag it to the corner of the screen. Once you have done that, go to the Add New Constraints button at the bottom of the screen. In this, we will add 2 constraints so as to help the auto layout render this entire view for different sizes of screens. We will add the leading constraint and the top constraint. By adding these 2 constraints, we ensure that whenever our app is installed, it will always fit at the top left corner of the screen. Now we have the top and the leading constraints. Now let's add the trailing and the bottom constraints. Select the stack view and then drag the stack view to the safe area. Shift-click on the trailing space and the bottom space to safe area to enter these constraints. So now, when we click on our stack view, we see 2 blue lines on our stack view. These are the trailing and the bottom constraints. We want these to be 0 so that our app covers the entire right area and the bottom area of the screen. So we hover over these constraints. When they turn thicker, we double click on them and then we reduce their value to 0. As you have seen, our app is now starting to come together. Now we have our bottom constraint, we double click on it and we also set it to 0. As you can see, our app has now covered the entire area of the screen. If I change the orientation of the screen, then it still covers the entire area of the screen. If I change my device from an iPhone 8 Plus to an iPad Pro, as you can see, it still covers the entirety of the screen, even in portrait mode as well as the landscape mode. Now, what I want is this label to have a fixed proportion with the screen so that these buttons do not look out of place on a device that is taller. So let's say that I want my label to have 33% of the real estate of the height. To do that, we will click on our label and then control drag it to the safe area and then add this constraint, equal heights. You can see that we are getting these red lines. That means that there is a conflict of the constraints. We click on this red line and we have a multiplier. So we change this multiplier to 0.33 or 33%. This way we have ensured that our label will always take 33% of the height of its parent view. Now you can see that this looks pretty similar to the app that we had in the beginning of the video. If I change the layout to landscape, then it still looks pretty good. If I changed it to another phone, it still looks pretty good. If I run this app on iPhone 8 Plus, and you can see that my calculator is now working. And if I change its orientation from portrait to landscape, it automatically changes its constraints so as to fit the layout that it has been given. Now if I run this app on an iPad, and it still looks pretty good. It's occupying the entire area of the screen just like we want it to. And as you can see, the top label is taking almost 33% of the height of the parent. If I change the orientation, then the label is still taking 33% height of the parent. Now, just as you saw, we made our constraints available to almost all of the screen layouts, whether it's an Plus model or the standard edition model, and for both of the orientations, landscape as well as portrait. Now I want my app to have some additional functionality so that I can show how easy it is to maintain this particular layout. So I have this objects.storyboard. Let's assume that you are working in a team and one of your team members has made a layout that he wants to add to the main app. So what you do is you import his storyboard object, convert that object into stack view, then you copy it so that you can paste it in your main.storyboard. Come to your main.storyboard, then you paste those objects, and then you embed them into the stack view. So I combine these two to form a single stack view. Stack view. So now I have my stack view objects ready. Now if I change the orientation, then this vanishes. So what I want to do is change the axis from vertical to horizontal, and then distribution to fill equally and spacing to be 10 points. Now if I change back to portrait orientation, then this does not look good. But the entire purpose of this group of objects was to provide additional functionality for the landscape view. So I go back to the landscape view, then this looks pretty good. So I want to hide this entire thing when it's in portrait mode. To do that, we will use the hidden object property. So I come to the portrait view, I select the particular stack that I want to hide, and then I come here on the drawing properties and I click on this plus icon. So when the width of the phone is compact and the height is regular, that means that it's in the portrait mode. Then I want to add the variation so that when the width is compact and height is regular, then hide this object. Here you can see that our entire object has become hidden when in the portrait mode. If I switch to landscape mode, then that object becomes visible. See how easy it was to add an entire group of objects into your original stack view? This is why AutoLayout is highly maintainable. Now to test this app, let's first run it on an iPhone 8 Plus. It's working in the portrait mode. If I switch to landscape mode, it's still working. Now, if I go back to my XCode and run it on an iPad Pro, since in both of the orientations the width is not compact, so our secondary group of objects is now visible in the iPad. This makes our layout much more pleasing to the eye. If I change the orientation, it's still visible and it's still pretty good. That's how you use AutoLayout to make your app work for different screen sizes and make it highly maintainable. We just added a whole bunch of objects into our original layout without making many changes as compared to what we would have to do if we had used simple constraints. Thank you for coming this far in the tutorial and have a good day.